Good evening and a very warm welcome to our third episode of season 2 of Talking About My Generation, TAMG as we call it. My name is Indrajit Gupta, I'm co-founder at Founding Fuel. This evening's episode is dedicated to all those who were crazy about sports, like all of you, I'm sure, and me too. I grew up in a sports-crazy joint family in Kolkata and went to school at La Martiniere, which laid a lot of emphasis on sports. So at home and at school, I ended up playing a variety of games, and it was an integral part of growing up during the 70s and 80s. And to top it all, my dad took me to every important local and international cricket, football, and hockey match. He was also a Davis Cup umpire, and I remember accompanying him to South Club and MSLTA courts as a young 10-year-old, sitting meters away from the Amritraj brothers, Shashi Menon, or even Ramesh Krishnan. These days, though, I end up attending live games at the stadium only on special occasions. Like many of you, I prefer to watch live sport on the telly. For the last 4 to 6 months of the lockdown, live sports almost disappeared from our lives. And it is now gradually starting to make a comeback, but in a very different avatar. To talk about this evening, we have the father and son duo, Partha and Atreyo Sinha, both diehard Arsenal fans. But before I introduce them, let me open with an image from their family album. Here it is. Here you can see Partha and Atreyo at a Mumbai Indians versus Chennai Super Kings IPL match at Wankhede in 2015. I think CSK would have perhaps won that match, I am guessing. Hello, Partha, how are you?
Hi, Indrajit. Good to be here.
Welcome to the show. So Partha joins us from Mumbai. He's moved in as president of at the Times of India Group just 2 days into the lockdown. Partha told us that he's quite used to watching the live Premier League matches with his friends at the pub in Mumbai. And I'm guessing the pandemic has obviously put a stop to that. So no more enjoying soccer, guzzling beer with friends, Partha?
That's right. But, maybe it has got replaced with something else. Like when you're watching alone, you move from possibly beer to single malt when you're watching the game.
Okay, there we get it. Okay. Cool. Great to have you. Atreyo joined Visa in New York in the middle of the lockdown after completing his master's in analytics from Duke. So hi, Atreyo, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, IG. Thanks for having us on here.
I have a question for you. I mean, one of the IPL matches just got over. My team lost, KKR. And so who are you kind of putting your money on this year's IPL?
Well, I know that there's a DC versus MI, Delhi Capitals versus Mumbai Indians game coming up. So I'm going to put my money on the winner of that.
Okay, but you're not taking position.
No position quite yet.
Okay. So those of you who've read Atreyo's column in Founding Fuel and listened to Partha's audiogram will know that these guys are special sports fans. They think and care deeply about the games they follow, have a very interesting point of view, and are actually well placed to explore the theme for this evening, which is inside the new world of sports in a bubble, right? Where they explore how the pandemic has changed our relationship with sports and how we're likely to experience the game differently as sports fans. But before I hand over to both of you, Partha and Atreyo, I have some important updates on our show at the end of this episode. So I'll be back. So stay tuned for that. And now over to you, Partha and Atreyo. Take it.
Hi, thanks, Indrajit. And thank you, all of you who have joined. I can see some, known faces already here. Hi, Vijay. Hi, Ramesh. And for the rest of you, if you can just drop in a hi, then maybe we can kind of pull you into the conversation and maybe, talk about one or two dark secrets of your sports fandom. So that will be interesting. I think quickly, let me tell you what are the kind of stuff that we are going to cover today. So we are trying to cover sort of three aspects of sports fandom. May not be in this particular order, or maybe we'll miss a little bit of things here and there. So the first and the most obvious one is the generational difference in approaching sport. I mean, Atreyo and I approach sport a little differently, and we are going to discuss about that. The second one being reality versus simulation. This is a big point, and both of us have very different points of views on that. And third one, possibly where we agree a lot, it could be the COVID bubble in sports, which is a new form of hierarchy. So before I start, possibly I want to ask a question to all of you, and maybe if you put in your answer there, then we can all discuss it at a subsequent point, which is, what is your what is the most favorite memory you have of a match, and was it watching live on television or was it watching live in the stadium? And I have the same question for you, Atreyo. So what is your one of the most memorable matches that you can think of?
So I know what you're getting at, but you'll be surprised to know that my favorite memory of a match is actually in the stadium. It is, I want to say it was 2003 TVS Cup, India, Australia. Australia made 286 for 8, which was unchaseable in 2003. People were just making 286 week in and week out like now. And I remember I was sitting with you, and it was Shoaib Akhtar to my left and Farooq Engineer behind us. And I had that scrapbook of mine, and I went to Shoaib Akhtar, and he was wearing like sunglasses at night. And I went up to Shoaib Akhtar and I asked him to autograph my scrapbook, and he just autographed the top of the scrapbook, just the cover, which I thought was very weird because, I was like, why wouldn't he? But now that I think about it, why would Shoaib Akhtar open my scrapbook, find an empty page, and autograph it? So he just autographed the top of my scrapbook and gave it back to me. But I think what was more exciting now looking back, and also was more exciting for you at the time, was Farooq Engineer sitting there explaining the game of cricket to us as it happened live. And obviously there's like a certain charm about a legend of the game just sitting there calling the game right behind you for you. That was crazy.
In fact, I remember very clearly, he was calling out the wides even before the umpire could call out the wide. It was awesome. And at some point I asked him, how do you know? He said, you got to look at the body language of the wicketkeeper. You got to look at the body language of the batsman. It's a wide, and from the angle where we are sitting, we couldn't see the wide very clearly. And, this is what is fantastic for me, watching the game with an expert, that kind of brings out the true color of the sport, the purity, the caliber, the skill, every time he explained that, and, I was like wondering, saying, yeah, now I know why he is so famous, and now I know why I look up to him. So actually our generation grew up going to the ground to watch a match,
Yeah.
And that kind of brought about the purity of the game, The skills were palpable. The skills, you could see what made them superheroes, right? So we are a part of the setup, no question about it. But the players were in the arena, enacting something epic. There was something really epic about the match. What happened with I'm a big fan of television sports also, but television is user friendly and somehow robbed sports of epicness. Television kind of turned epicness into everydayness. I don't know whether that's the best thing to happen. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's interesting. If you look at some of the stories that we've got, thank you guys for sharing your experiences. Those are some incredible stories. Priyo chiming in with Boris Becker, and Ramesh as well with a great story. Rob, Charles. The Rob story is crazy. Watching Messi played managed by Maradona, that's a dream of yours. in your Argentina shirt on the cover. No, thanks Charles as well. Thanks everyone for the stories. Perry. That's amazing. I think one of the things that I most memorable watching in Brabant Stadium. Wow, yeah, these are some unbelievable stories. Like, to think that I had a TVS Cup game as my memory. But it's also, I think that's also another interesting part of this, right? I think yes, there is something incredible about watching it live, but at the same time, not to knock it. Obviously, it's incredible to have that experience and everything. But as someone who's grown up watching it on TV, the lack of angles, the lack of close-ups, I can't see what my manager's face looks like, when I'm at a game or whatever. And in fact, we were talking to IG about this earlier, and he said that even when you're like, in the box or something watching a cricket game, most people's eyes are on the TV anyway, in the box. So clearly, I think that, there is something to be said for, let's say, having an analyst who's sitting there in the broadcasting studio, with their commentary or like with their pre-game, post-game insights. And I think that having that sort of, detail that you can see in a game during the game actually being on, Hawkeye and things like that, goal line technology, in tennis and stuff like that, you can see where the ball landed. And, I think that's interesting to think about, because users now want more detail. Users now want to be able to see the game in different ways. And also, if we were to take it one step further, users kind of want to be able to control some of the outcome. And I think that's somewhere, I think that simulation and that whole sentiment of yours comes in, which negative sentiment, you don't like it. But I think it's interesting because, I'm out there watching, let's say, Arteta manage Arsenal. Mikel Arteta is the current manager of our favorite team, Arsenal. And I have certain ways that I like to play the game. Now, when I'm on the PlayStation, for example, right, I'm in the game. When I'm playing FIFA, I'm managing Arsenal. I'm making my own tactical tweaks. Obviously, it's not real, but I think that changes the way I engage. I think it changes the way I engage with the game. I play Aubameyang on the right. Aubameyang plays on the left in the real game. I play Pepe on the left. He plays on the right. And that little switch, it means nothing, right? But I think that it's taken my fandom and my relationship with my team to a very different place. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of, that jump digitally?
Yeah. In fact, I have seen you guys playing, like manager mode and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
My thing is, we accepted the fact that we are outside the game. I don't think your generation can't accept the fact that you're outside the game. You still try to control it, whether through a PlayStation simulation or something, or I don't know. I mean, something that I'm really uncomfortable about is the simulated noise in this post-COVID, live sports where there are no people on the stands, and they actually simulate the noise. So I think simulation was never a part of the sports. For us, sports had to be real. I mean, when there's a collective sigh which is going, when somebody has, missed a goal or somebody has dropped a catch, it's actually one guy sitting there playing a button, or kind of what, think about it. Or worse still, it could be a dreaded algorithm, which is generating the news. So to me, the whole story of simulation will, we will take a lot of time. Our generation will take a lot of time to accept simulation as a part of the game, which is much easier for you. I mean, are you guys much more comfortable with the idea of simulation? Am I right?
I think so. I think, I think it obviously is, now that you put it that way, someone sitting in a room, pressing a button, trying to line it up with the event that just took place. Like, that's pretty crazy. If you think about it that way, I get that. But at the same time, this is hopefully temporary, right? Hopefully this is just a proxy. And hopefully we'll have fans back in the grounds. But I think up until then, there's going to be all of these like strange adjustments, which hopefully aren't long-term adjustments. But then it also makes you think about what it means to be a fan at the ground, right? Because think about also, I guess, the hierarchy of sports fandom, right? If we want to touch on that, I think that's one of those things that has always bothered me, because maybe, back in the day, it was a little bit more affordable for local supporters and whatnot to be able to go watch a game. But for me to try and watch a game at Wankhede without somebody's invitation or something like that, it's not just a thing I can do. It's like an event. You have to make a day out of it. You know what I mean? To watch a game that day, or for example, I'm sure Londoners who want to go watch Arsenal and watch Chelsea and whatnot. Also, it's like a day. There's obviously a lot of complaints that we've heard from Premier League fans and even NBA fans that a lot of tourists just kind of come in and like make a trip to Arsenal or like if that's not free, they can't get tickets. They just go make a trip to like Stamford Bridge to watch Chelsea. And it's interesting because even when we went, right, in many senses of the word, we are anything but pure fans. We're not from London. We don't have any ownership over that, that relationship with the club. But we love Arsenal and we are fans. And we're I think it's just a hallmark of the modern game that you're going to have these global fans who live, in every corner of the world who are going to want to come and see you. But then, do you remember when we watched that Liverpool Christmas game, the 3-3 game in 2017? We were sitting there in that posh little whatever it was, that box or whatever, and everybody around us was so snooty. They were like, oh, my grandfather and I have been watching Arsenal, and it was such a stiff upper lip vibe. So what do you think about that? The hierarchy of sports fandom. Obviously, the guy who's commenting on Twitter, posting on Reddit or whatever, it doesn't have the same status as somebody who's a regular, like a season ticket holder. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of maybe COVID has taken that away to some extent by taking all fans out of the stadium?
So you're saying kind of a democracy of fandom.
Exactly, like a democratization of fandom, if you will.
Yeah. Okay, so I think there's a distinct possibility of that. I'm not denying it. There could be a bit of a, currently there's a difference between the fan who goes to the ground, who has a allocated seat, and who you almost know that what kind of sound will come from which part of the ground. So there is a very defined hierarchy versus people like you and me who will post on social media and get onto Reddit, and
exactly.
of course they kind of look down upon, but I know that hierarchy may go because there is no fan on the stands, and so everybody is kind of enjoying it on television and Reddit. It's fine. But did you notice another thing? That the COVID itself has kind of created a hierarchy of sorts.
Right.
The players have kind of COVID privilege, They get tested, and after that they're kept in a bubble in North London or Sharjah, or wherever it is.
Orlando,
contact sport. Orlando. They play contact sports. They kind of symbolically don't spit shine the ball. If you remember, that Virat Kohli almost stopped short of spit shining the ball, and so I know it's a lot of optics. So
lots of optics. But the masks, the PSG Bayern masks, everybody's nose is out.
Absolutely, everybody's nose is out. So it's a lot of optics. So they play contact sport, but you and I, we can't even go to our grandmother's or our friend's house to watch a match.
Right.
Even if you see in the ground, the players and the coach, they hug each other and all. If you see the officials, they sit far up on the stands, right? They're like somewhere else altogether. So, this is a different kind of hierarchy which is getting planned through COVID. And I mean, you were telling me something about NBA. There's a different kind of privilege which is getting created.
Right. No, absolutely. I think one of the interesting things about that hierarchy is that maybe it already, of course it already exists, right? All that COVID's doing is this kind of, pun intended, unmasking this hierarchy, right? Kind of exposing it. And I think the reason that's happening is, we talked about this yesterday as well, right? Like some of the sportsmen who need this for their careers, whether it's from a monetary point of view, a lot of them are already in debt, knee deep in debt, and they need to get out of it. And for, let's say, it's nice to have guys like Virat Kohli and LeBron James who are clearly elite and clearly champions, and they still choose to come back and play, and that's amazing. But at the same time, you think about like an Alex Caruso who plays for the Los Angeles Lakers, right? He's made his name during this post-COVID bubble NBA. Like he's definitely become very, very popular. Likewise, Rahul Tewatia, for example, is much more of a household name than he, maybe would have been if he decided to sit out this post-COVID edition of IPL. And then you've got, let's say, Bukayo Saka, for example, for Arsenal, right? These are players who've had turning points in their careers coincide with the pandemic. So they haven't really had the option of sitting out. And I think that that's another interesting hierarchy as well that has been exposed, right? You have players who can afford to sit out a game, if you will. Like there was a case study in MLB, Major League Baseball in the US, and I believe the former chief operating officer came out and said that if you're a guy who's made 30 million in the last 3 years, you don't care. like playing at that point is purely about the joy of the game, or like being a champion and winning and what all of these intangible things. But for a lot of people, you're knee deep in debt. You need to pay money. You need to capitalize on an opportunity and hopefully make a name for yourself. So I think it's definitely affecting different players differently, as it is with the world, right? As it is with anybody else in the world. So it's kind of like, to get philosophical and kind of come back to what we always like to talk about, like sport is just a little smaller version, I guess, if you will, of life. That's exactly what it is, right?
Yeah, somewhere. I mean, if you have to look at it philosophically, right, it is a microcosm. It is a microcosm of sorts. So the point there is, it's happening everywhere. COVID has created a bubble. See, it's funny. Originally, COVID was supposed to democratize the world because it was an equal opportunity pathogen.
Right.
Like it didn't differentiate between the rich and the poor and then very quickly we have created a hierarchy of sorts around COVID. So if you matter, you are inside a bubble, and if you don't matter, you are outside the bubble. So if you're outside the bubble, then you either kind of lock yourself at home. If you're inside the bubble, you play contact sport, then you go to work and you travel in your jet and do holiday in Goa. If you are not within that bubble, then you have to either segregate yourself or expose yourself to the pathogen.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
Like I know that sports is also a reflection of real life. But having said that, I'm so grateful that live sports is back. And I do you remember those 2 months when live sports were not there?
Oh yeah. That was interview season for me. I was going through all those interviews. That was bad.
And I had just joined a new job.
Yeah.
And like where I was planning my travel and stuff like that, it turned into like Zoom call one after the other, and suddenly I realized that newspapers can't reach people's houses. And so that kind of stress, and all your interviews were getting delayed and like pushed around and stuff like that.
Cancelled. Yeah.
And that time, I think I realized that the only way to deal with COVID stress is the stress that Arsenal gives us as a team.
Counter stress.
Absolutely. But what do you think, Atreyo, is possibly your, biggest hope or biggest fear in the post-COVID sports world?
I think that's a good question, right? And I think that's something I'd like to also pass on to everybody else who is still live and watching with us. Thank you for sticking around. This is a question. This is something we've been discussing for the last few weeks. We're curious to hear your thoughts, right? Are you more hopeful or are you more fearful about a post-COVID sports world? And if so, what are you hopeful about? What are you fearful about? What do you think might happen? And for me to try and take a stab at answering that, I think. Look, how you said COVID was supposed to be an equal opportunity killer. The interesting thing is that the other thing we're talking about, sports, is also supposed to be equal opportunity, right? Sports is one of the reasons we love sports so much, is that it's we don't care where you come from. We don't care what your, caste, color, creed, background, race is. We literally just care about how good you are. It's just it's just, are you a quality player? And if you are, you will most likely get a chance. But obviously over time, as with anything that has monetary potential, sports also has started developing a hierarchy. And I think the thing I'm optimistic about is maybe it's made people kind of have a little bit of an introspective moment, maybe take a hard look inside and see what's going wrong. And maybe we might just approach, this is just me being perennially optimistic. You have to, as an Arsenal fan. But I'm just being optimistic, and I'm thinking maybe profit won't be, it will still be a big motive, but maybe, the human approach and human values will come back into the game, and maybe the team with the most money, I don't know if Rob's still here, but I'm talking about you and Chelsea. Maybe the team with the most money won't win the Premier League. Maybe the IPL, the Premier League, the NBA League, you'll have teams that will hopefully have a more human-centric approach and maybe win. Maybe you'll have better player safety rules. Maybe you'll have safer standing. Maybe you'll have better player-fan relationships. So there's a lot, I think, that we can be optimistic about. But what is your thing that you're hopeful about or fearful of, either or?
I am actually fearful about something, which is they have by now figured out how to have the game without the fans.
I see.
On the stands.
Yeah.
So imagine if the whole thing is a simulated environment, and it doesn't matter whether Arsenal and Liverpool are playing in England, or they're playing in Sharjah, or they're playing in Africa. So that is my fear, because if there's a new business model, if there's a new business model around sports where this beautiful game will get out of the hands of common people, that is what I'm slightly fearful about. But I don't think that's going to be the truth. The truth will always remain that the world of sport cannot live without fan passion. I think fans possibly constitute 50% of the game, and I'm hopeful we'll have a more democratized, less hierarchical fandom of sports. So that's my biggest hope.
Hopefully.
So IG, I think if you could join us back, please. Maybe there are some questions we can take on.
Yes, thank you. That was a fascinating conversation. And I want to kind of dive straight in, because there have been some wonderful questions, comments that have come in. And I want to pick up the strand that Atreyo, I think, spoke about, which is that the in-stadia experience of watching a game, it's hard to kind of compare that today with what you get on television. But and we spoke about my experience with watching it from inside a box yesterday, right? People staring at the television screen. But there's one more facet, and I want to link it to the question that Vijay Bhatt has asked about radio. If you've seen some of the test matches at Lord's, there are a whole bunch of people, and the viewing experience at Lord's is at a different level compared to what we get here. They have these headphones kind of red, I don't know. They're listening into the commentary. I wonder if that's really going to be the shape of things to come, the best of both worlds. What do you think, Atreyo?
I think that could be great. I definitely think that would be great. I think one of the things that I noticed, I was watching the Tottenham Hotspur documentary, All or Nothing, on Amazon Prime, and one of the things that I noticed was Mourinho, who's the manager, he would see a goal, like a miss, like in real life, and then he'd run back immediately to the seat, and he'd go and look at it on an iPad, and there'd be another assistant with another iPad showing him a different angle view, and then another one drawing something out on a third iPad. So clearly, I think that somewhere there will be that the marriage of, even for fans, right? There will be the marriage of the digital experience and the in-stadium experience, like you said. Hopefully, that is the best of both worlds, and hopefully that doesn't just confuse people and take away from the experience.
Got it. That's a great.
Actually, I want to address Vijay's question also. Yes. First of all, Vijay is a very, very old friend. I know him for many, many years, and I think it's a fascinating question. I also have grown up as a child listening to radio, and Vijay's question was kind of radio is a form of simulation or not. I want to draw all your attention to one simple thing, which is how the narrative of the game is being played out. See, if you remember the radio commentary, it is to be a real reflection of the sentiment of the game. Yeah. It was long drawn, blah, blah, everything is fine. But it reflected the real sentiment of the game. Versus in IPL, there's a permanent cheer. If you see that everybody is 24/7 happy. Initially I was very uncomfortable with the idea of, how can everybody be 24/7 happy in a game? Like all the moments in the game are high cheer. And then all of a sudden, I realized that is what simulation is. And what we heard on radio as a child was not really simulation. It reflected the real sentiment of the match. But remember, we came around IPL. So we came around that level of simulation. I think we'll come around the other levels of simulation, which is this somebody pressing a button for a collective sigh or something. We'll possibly come around that. We love sports too much.
Sure. That's well put. I know there was a lot of discomfort with simulation in your conversation and in some of the comments that came up. Partha, if you were to kind of suggest two things that you would much rather that we stop doing. There were some comments, I think Charles had some issues with the cheerleaders. Someone else had, I think Shrayan from Calcutta had some comments about the simulated noise, excessive noise, right? What, from your perspective as fans, both of you, what would you much rather have less of?
See, I think we need to look at the structure of a sports narrative. Why do we like sport? Because the people who are playing it, according to us, according to fans, are superhumans.
Right.
So they can do things which we love, which in our wildest dreams we'll not be able to do ourselves. And therefore, we thoroughly enjoy it. Now, whatever you do, accentuate the human caliber. You don't need extraneous things. Like the point is, I think, to make it more inclusive, to get more audience into the fold. A lot of television programming has done many things to get people into the fold. But to me, the biggest thing is don't add extraneous things. Do 50 things to underscore the beauty of the game,
Right.
to underline how good the players are. Like those free kicks of Messi, when you see it from 10 angles, you realize he's a pure genius. I mean, it's not possible humanly to do it. And that's the beauty of the game. Give me those 50 angles. Don't get 3 cheerleaders dancing around to celebrate that Messi's goal. I don't need it. If I have to see, cheerleaders dancing, I will watch games which I don't care about much. Maybe I but
Atreyo, you have anything to add? I'll just kind of add on a question on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just drawing from what Partha was referring to. Partha, you're part of the media industry, and there's been a lot of pressure, particularly from broadcasters, to broaden the audience, right? And bring in people who are not avid sports fans like you, right? Who sit on the fringes, who want to kind of make this into a family viewing experience, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, a lot of gimmicky stuff comes in, which takes away from the quality of the experience, right?
Yeah.
We've seen that in the past. I don't want to get more specific than that. Any things that strike you, both of you, in terms of what we need to cut out? We need to broaden and bring in new audiences, because the whole commercial aspect of the game is important to sustain and make it sustainable, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, how do you ensure that there is some amount of purity left?
I think, it's obviously easy to say this and probably much harder to act on it, but I do think that the correct way to do it is, instead of trying to pander at the actual broadcasting level and to try and create content that, potentially everybody in the family will like or whatever, I think it's much better to actually create sports, like from a grassroots level, actually improve sports, such that you have all sorts of sports that are played well. For example, in India, if we play sports other than cricket really well, you're going to naturally have more people tune in to watch, our other athletes do really well in different fields. Likewise, it's something that I think everyone in my family saw with the Women's World Cup when it came to women's cricket, is that the quality was so good that they didn't need to pander. They didn't need to come to us and be like, the right thing to do would be to watch this. It doesn't matter whether it's the right thing to do. They were just so good. The Indian women's cricket team is unbelievable. And I love watching them, and I'm following them on Instagram, and I'm always looking at their tweets. I engage with them, but I'm already a sports fan. But let's say that, there was a little girl who didn't love watching Bout, which I don't know why she would, but but maybe she didn't. And maybe for her, watching the Indian women's cricket team was that much better. And maybe watching Smriti Mandhana did that for her. So just create better, I think, sports, which is more inclusive in its own way. I think will draw different viewers to your screens, hopefully. So
right. Partha, you want to take a stab at that question?
Yeah, I think also with existing sport, you can add more points of views. I mean, I will give you an example. It happened right in front of our eyes. Typically, experts used to be people who played the game. And then came Harsha Bhogle. He never played cricket, but he made the definition of expertise very different. I always saw a reflection of myself in Harsha. I had all those questions. I wanted to ask all these questions. There is a guy who was representing me and asking. It actually, I think somebody like Harsha would get a lot more people into the game. So similarly, if we can get different points of views, different perspectives, that will get more people into the game. And that, I think, is highly encourageable. That is highly welcome, but not necessarily adding bells and whistles,
Absolutely. Cut out those gimmicks. I wish we could have gone on. This is a subject that we could have gone on for another hour, but I'm kind of conscious of the time. And the questions that we haven't been able to discuss on this show. we'll pick up with Partha and Atreyo on our Slack channel. So please drop your questions either there, or if you've already kind of added it to the comments box, we'll pick it up and discuss it on our Slack channel. I hope you've kind of enjoyed this chat. Do share your feedback, and you can leave your comments in the comments box below. Finally, I have an announcement. Talking about my generation, we'll be taking a week's break to help us catch our breath and come back recharged. So there will be no episode next Saturday. That's October 17th. But we'll be back on the next Saturday, the Saturday after that, which is 24th evening, with our first, as you can see on the screen, with our first mother-in-law, daughter-in-law jodi, right? That's Sangeeta Mal, novelist, curator. She's a treasurer with Fiki Flow as well. Very interesting lady, based in Bombay. And Sakshi Mal, who's a consultant with EY in New York. You've already met, of course, you've met Damodar, Sangeeta's husband, and Harsh, who anchors these episodes. And so Sangeeta and Sakshi have chosen to explore the theme, what it means to be a working woman in 2020. And I can tell you, it'll be a compelling and riveting conversation. So don't miss it on October 24th, and watch out for Sakshi's column and Sangeeta's audiogram in the early part of the week, starting October 19th. So that's it from all of us. Thank you, Partha and Atreyo. Lovely having you. Thank you to the audience for joining us this week. Have a great weekend, and I must apologize before I exit. I mean, KKR seemed all set to have lost. I don't know how they snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, but they seem to have, and I'm delighted. And we hope to see all of you back on October 24th at 7:30 p.m. So we'll have more of these glorious uncertainties of sport in our lives as well. So thank you again. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And Rana and Sumit, nothing is lost, and 6 goals happen. It's okay. Thank you.
Awesome.